Today we got a 2017 Subaru WRX in the shop. Clutch is slipping extremely bad. This thing only has 50,000 miles, so I don't know if this guy's racing around and stuff. But we're going to pull this transmission off and take a look at the clutch. I have a replacement already ready to go in, so let's get started. These transmissions are pretty easy to remove, so here we're going to start working on getting this intercooler off to access the stuff underneath it. This is my first time doing a WRX this new. They're all pretty similar. You gotta remove the intercooler on all of them. The exhaust is set up a little different on this one. This one's actually easier. On the older ones you had to remove a downpipe. Next, we need to work on this slave cylinder here. There's two 14mm bolts, then this ground held on by a 12 starter, and then all of these wiring connections over here. There is a small ground here held on by this 10mm. And I forgot to mention this little torque rod needs to be removed from the transmission. It's just held on by 14mm bolts. Next, we gotta disconnect the wiring that comes from the battery on the starter. I just disconnected the terminal off the battery so that it doesn't short out against the body. And then this upper bolt holding the starter in right there. And then we can get the second bolt from the bottom. Actually, everything else is done from the bottom. under the car now. As you can see here, we gotta remove the exhaust from right there. I already pre-sprayed these with penetrating oil. There's another bolt there, another bolt there. Come back to the drive shaft. I'm gonna have to remove these right here. These two for the carrier bearing, and then it just slides out of the rear output shaft there. And then the CV axles, they will need to be removed. I usually just pop this lower bolt on top of the ball joint and I lift it out. Same on this side. I've already pre-sprayed all of these with penetrating oil. And then we can get to all the bolts that hold the transmission in, and we'll get it out. I struggled getting that lower ball joint off of the suspension, so I moved on to the exhaust while I cooled off. Okay, well, I had to abandon getting the lower ball joint out because it was rust welded. So what I did was I removed these two lower strut bolts, and then I used the air hammer to push the shaft of the outer joint out because that was also rust welded, especially on the left side. And I loosened all this so nothing's under crazy tension. And this upper one is a camber bolt, so I marked this with some whiteout so we can get it back aligned when we put it back together. That's nasty. Here's a look at this drain bolt. That's a lot of metal for 50,000 miles. So we're gonna clean that off, put that back in with a new crush washer. Okay, so we got that drive shaft out. We have these two CV axles out. It's drained. All we have to do now is undo the shift cables, which run to the top of this model year. It's kind of weird. And I need to remove that lower starter bolt and remove the starter. After looking at the service manual, I saw that you just remove this lower panel right under the shifter, and then you can access the shift cables, and they just held on by clips. It ended up taking quite a bit of time to separate this trans from the motor. These dowel pins were really seized on there. Off camera, I used my torch to heat the dowel pins and let them cool while I pried. Alright, well this transmission is down. That was kind of a struggle. These dowel pins here, they were like seized in there. So I had to go back and forth using the pry bar and heat. And that eventually loosened it up and it released and came off. the heat is important because you have two different types of metals here and they expand at different rates, and eventually they just kind of let go of each other. So anyway, transmission is off. I'm going to remove the clutch right now. Oh yeah. Whew, whew, whew. Okay, well, as suspected, this clutch is absolutely done. Worn all the way down to the rivets. And that's why they couldn't move anywhere. This pressure plate has seen better days. And just for reference, this is what a good clutch disc is supposed to look like. See those rivets right there? There's a lot of material before you hit those rivets. So this car must have been exhibiting symptoms for a very long time to get this far down. It's pretty crazy. Flush. In this stage, I just use a regular ratchet and socket and go around in the torque sequence and slowly tighten the pressure plate onto the flywheel. It compresses the springs on the pressure plate, and eventually it bottoms out, and that's when you torque everything. I don't want to hear. Brand new. The clutch release bearing is installed. Put a little bit of this grease that it comes with on here. The flywheel, that was torqued to yield bolts, so you do like 22 pounds on a regular torque wrench, and then it's 30 to 35 degrees on a angle style torque wrench. You could mark the head of the bolt, but I got this fancy torque wrench, so I just used that. So the new clutch installed. The pattern is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just going across from each other. You saw me do it while I was tightening it. And the way I kept the crank from spinning, I put a ratchet on the crankshaft, and then I just propped it against the body of the car, and that held it in place so I could torque the flywheel to spec. Got the transmission all ready to go in. Usually these are pretty easy to get in. You line up these studs here with the corresponding holes on the transmission, and then you just have a coworker spin the crank as you push on the transmission forward into the motor. It usually slides right in. I'm just gonna grease up those dowel areas and should be good. After reinstalling everything, I thought I hit record on my GoPro to film filling up the transmission, but I guess I didn't. There's a dipstick on the right hand side just above where the CV axle goes in, and you fill it through there. Okay, we're in the Subi. Clutch pedal feels good. Got movement. Reverse. Cool. Well, that clutch works. Let's take it for a test drive. First gear. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Well, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. I release videos like this every week and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Thanks again.